The Grand Hall of the Vraxian Empire was filled with the buzz of alien voices. Delegates from all over the galaxy had gathered to discuss peace, technology, and trade. The air was thick with the scent of strange perfumes, and the floors glowed with a soft blue light. But even in such an important setting, one thing was drawing the most attention. In the center of the room stood Captain Ryan Holt, the human representative. His tall, broad figure was encased in a gleaming suit of advanced power armor, a masterpiece of human engineering. The armor was sleek, with sharp lines and glowing red accents. It could withstand the harshest conditions, laser blasts, extreme temperatures, and even the deadly forces of space. To anyone who had seen it in action, it was clear. This was a symbol of human strength. Ryan stood calmly, his hands clasped behind his back, waiting for the proceedings to begin. He had been to many diplomatic summits, but this one felt different. The eyes of many species were on him, curious about the humans who had begun making their mark in the galaxy. But it wasn't the other ambassadors who were the real problem. It was Princess Nessa of the Vraxian Empire. Known for her beauty and power, she had a reputation for arrogance that was as famous as her royal bloodline. As she walked into the room, her eyes immediately locked onto Ryan. Her sharp features twisted into a smirk as she took in his armor. To her, it was a relic, a crutch for a weak species. Human, she called out, her voice smooth and filled with a quiet challenge. "I've heard much about your armor, but I've yet to see anything that impresses me." Ryan didn't flinch. He had heard this before. The Vraxians were known for their pride. They considered themselves to be the most advanced species in the galaxy, and they couldn't understand why a simple human would need such heavy protection. Princess Nessa stepped forward, her long silver hair flowing behind her like a ribbon. "You rely on your armor to protect you, but true strength doesn't come from metal. It comes from within." She raised an eyebrow, her voice laced with mockery. "I challenge you, Captain Holt. If you are as strong as your armor suggests, take it off. Fight me without it. Show me what humans are truly made of." The room fell silent. The other delegates watched in disbelief. A challenge to fight without armor in front of everyone. It was unheard of. The Vraxians loved to test the strength of others, but this was bold, even by their standards. Ryan's eyes narrowed. He knew what she was trying to do. She thought he was just a man hiding behind technology, incapable of standing on his own. He had faced battles in the harshest conditions without a suit, and he wasn't about to let a princess, no matter how powerful, belittle the strength of humanity. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Ryan asked, his voice calm but filled with a hint of warning. Nessa's lips curled into a smile, her confidence unwavering. "Of course. Let's see if your human strength is as impressive as your armor." Ryan took a deep breath. The challenge was set. With a nod, he slowly began to remove the helmet of his suit, revealing his face to the room. The crowd gasped. No one expected him to take off his armor, and no one expected what came next. Princess Nessa stood still, her mind racing. Her body was bruised and battered, but her pride, the one thing she had never questioned, was beginning to crack. Ryan had shown her that strength was more than just power. It was resilience, the ability to learn, and, most importantly, the ability to adapt. These were things she had never fully understood, and now, with every passing second, she felt herself reevaluating everything she had ever known. Ryan, standing across from her, was no longer the same soldier she had first mocked. He was more than that now. He was a reflection of everything she had underestimated in humans: resilience, perseverance, and a strength that went beyond muscle or technology. Nessa's breath slowed, and for the first time, she felt vulnerable. I've never been bested like this before, she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. The truth of her words hung in the air, and Ryan could see the shift in her eyes. For the first time in their fight, she wasn't just angry, she was reflecting, thinking. You were never supposed to be bested, Ryan said, his voice calm but firm. You've always believed that power is everything, but you've seen now that power can only take you so far. Nessa's gaze sharpened. She was a warrior at heart, and the sting of defeat still lingered. But this wasn't the end of the battle. It was a turning point. She knew this. She couldn't give up, not now. You think I'm weak? She asked, her voice growing steadier. You think you've won just because you taught me a lesson. Ryan didn't answer immediately. He watched her carefully, waiting for the right moment to speak. The energy between them was charged, like the calm before a storm. Nessa wasn't going to back down, not after everything that had happened. And Ryan knew that this wasn't just a fight about physical strength anymore. It was a fight about respect, about understanding each other. I didn't come here to win in the way you think, Ryan said, taking a slow step forward. This was never about proving who was stronger. This was about showing you that there's more to strength than just your powers or your royal bloodline. There's strength in being able to grow, to change. Nessa's eyes narrowed as she considered his words. She could feel something inside her shifting, but she wasn't ready to admit it. Not yet. She had always been the one in control, the one who dominated every battle, every conversation. But now in this moment, she found herself questioning everything. Ryan, sensing her hesitation, took another step closer. You have the potential to be stronger than you ever thought, Nessa. But you need to stop fighting the way you always have. You need to stop relying on what's been given to you. True strength comes from within. There was a long silence. Nessa stood there, still reeling from the revelation. For the first time, she wasn't sure who was winning this fight, her or Ryan. The power she had always relied on seemed so small now, in comparison to the bigger lesson she was learning. Finally, Nessa straightened up, her shoulders squared. I may have underestimated you, human, but don't think I've given up, she said, her voice steady, but with a new sense of respect. I will not stop until this fight is over. I will fight with everything I have, but I will do it differently. You've taught me that. Ryan nodded, his expression softening. I knew you wouldn't give up. You're strong, Nessa. I can see that now. With those words hanging between them, Nessa lifted her chin, her eyes no longer filled with blind anger, but with determination. She had learned something invaluable in this fight, not just about Ryan, but about herself. She had learned that strength wasn't just about power. It was about the courage to change, to evolve, to push past your limits. The fight wasn't over, but this time it wasn't about who had the strongest power. It was about who could learn the most. And now Nessa was ready to fight in a new way. Princess Nessa stood still for a moment, her body still glowing with energy. Her chest rose and fell with each heavy breath, and her eyes, once full of arrogant fire, now showed a hint of doubt. For the first time, she was unsure of herself. She had unleashed everything she had, every bit of her royal power. Yet this human, this soldier, was still standing. Ryan Holt, on the other hand, was feeling every second of the battle. His body ached from the constant movement, his muscles screaming for rest, but his mind was sharp. He couldn't afford to back down now. Nessa had underestimated him from the start, thinking that all humans were weak and relied only on technology. But Ryan knew something she didn't. Humans had a drive, a will to push through the toughest challenges, something that couldn't be measured in just raw power. You're still standing, Nessa said, her voice laced with disbelief. How? Ryan wiped the sweat from his brow, keeping his eyes on her. It's called determination, he said, his voice steady despite the pain. Humans don't give up easily. The princess scoffed, clearly not understanding. She raised her hand, and the ground beneath them began to rumble again. The air shimmered with the power she was about to unleash, her fingers crackling with energy. Ryan took a deep breath, preparing himself for whatever came next. He knew she wouldn't stop until she had used every last bit of her strength. Without warning, Nessa sent a wave of energy toward him. It was fast, and it was powerful. But Ryan had learned from their previous exchanges. He didn't try to dodge this time. Instead, he stood his ground, his body tensing, waiting for the right moment. As the energy blast neared, he used every ounce of his strength to leap forward, closing the distance between them. Nessa's eyes widened as Ryan launched himself at her, moving faster than she had expected. In the split second that followed, Ryan grabbed her arm, using her own energy against her. With a quick twist, he threw her off balance, sending her crashing to the ground. The impact was hard, and for the first time, the princess was on the ground, struggling to regain control. The audience gasped. No one had ever seen the great Princess Nessa brought down like this. Her pride was shattered. She had always been the one to defeat her opponents with ease, to show off her power and skill. But now she was the one lying in the dirt. Ryan stood above her, breathing heavily. His hands were clenched into fists, his body battered, but he didn't show any sign of slowing down. "This is over, Nessa," he said, his voice firm but not cruel. "You can keep fighting, but you're only fooling yourself." Nessa, still struggling to get to her feet, glared at him. She wasn't used to being spoken to this way. She was the princess of the Vraxian Empire, a being of unimaginable power. Yet here was a human, someone she had once thought of as weak, standing over her unbroken. "You're wrong, human," she spat, her voice filled with anger. "I will never stop fighting. I am the future of my people. I will not be defeated by someone like you." Ryan didn't respond. He knew better than to argue with her. The princess had to see for herself that strength didn't come from royal blood or overwhelming power. It came from within. And as long as she refused to accept that, she would never truly understand what it meant to be strong. The arena was still, the tension hanging in the air. Nessa was down, but she wasn't done. And Ryan was ready to face whatever she had left. This wasn't just a fight for victory anymore. It was a lesson in what it meant to be human. The Vraxian Empire's royal palace was quiet, but the air was charged with change. Princess Nessa stood in front of a large window, staring out at the sprawling city below. The sun was setting, casting a golden light over the high towers of the empire. But Nessa wasn't looking at the view. Her mind was focused on the lessons she had learned, lessons that had turned her world upside down. Ryan Holt stood beside her, his arms crossed over his chest. The battle was over, but the journey wasn't. He had come to the Vraxian homeworld as an outsider, a representative of humanity. Now he was leaving with something far more valuable, respect and understanding from one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. Nessa glanced at him, her expression thoughtful. "I never imagined I would learn this much from a human," she said, her voice filled with respect. "Everything I thought I knew about strength and power, it's all different now." Ryan gave a small smile. Strength isn't about winning every fight or being the most powerful. It's about learning from each experience and knowing when to adapt. You've got that now. She nodded slowly, her gaze returning to the horizon. "I've been so focused on being the strongest. But now I see that strength comes from knowing when to fight and when to listen. When to push forward and when to change." There was a pause, and then Nessa turned to face him. "Thank you, Ryan. For everything. You didn't just show me how to fight. You showed me how to be a better leader." Ryan's smile grew a little wider. "You were always a leader, Nessa. You just needed to see it for yourself." The doors to the room opened, and Emperor Tharn, Nessa's father, stepped inside. His face was as hard as ever, but there was a change in his eyes. He had watched the entire battle, and while he hadn't agreed with the way things had unfolded, he couldn't deny the transformation in his daughter. "Nessa," the Emperor began, his voice quieter than usual, "I've watched you fight, and I've watched you change. For the first time, I see the potential for you to lead our people, not with force, but with wisdom. It's a lesson I never thought I'd learn." Nessa's eyes softened. "Thank you, Father. I know it's not easy for you to accept this change, but I believe this is the way forward. For our people, and for the future." The Emperor looked at Ryan, then back at his daughter. "I don't understand everything you've learned, but I see that it's important, and that's enough for me. Perhaps it's time for us to rethink our place in the galaxy. We've always relied on power, but now, perhaps we should consider other paths." Ryan stepped forward, his voice calm and clear. "The universe is full of possibilities. Humans didn't come this far by fighting alone. We built alliances, learned from others, and fought side by side. I think that's the future of every species, including the Vraxians." The Emperor nodded slowly, his face unreadable. "An alliance, then. I suppose we'll see if this human idea is truly as wise as you say." Nessa's face brightened. "It's a start, Father. A new beginning." The Emperor didn't smile, but there was a faint nod of approval. He turned to leave, but before he did, he paused and looked back at Ryan. "We'll see, human. We'll see." As the Emperor left the room, Nessa and Ryan exchanged a glance. There was still much to do. But now there was hope. The Vraxian Empire would change, and humanity would be a part of that change. Nessa stepped up to Ryan, offering her hand. "Thank you for showing me a different way, for teaching me that there's more to being strong than what I've always known." Ryan shook her hand firmly. "It's been an honor, Nessa. I'm sure the future will be brighter with you leading." The two of them stood together, looking out over the city, knowing that they had just started something important. The galaxy was vast, and the challenges would continue, but now they had a new understanding. Together, they could make a difference. And for the first time, Nessa felt ready to face whatever came next. The air in the grand arena was thick with tension. Alien spectators from various species filled the seats, watching in silence. In the center of the ring stood Captain Ryan Holt, now without his helmet. He could feel the cold of the alien world pressing against his skin, but his mind was focused. Across from him, Princess Nessa stood poised, her arms crossed, a confident smirk on her face. Ryan had removed his armor's helmet, but he wasn't foolish enough to think the fight was over. He knew the princess was a skilled fighter. Her alien abilities, honed over centuries of royal training, were nothing to underestimate. But what she didn't understand was that humans were strong in ways no one could predict. Ryan had been in countless battles, and he had learned that victory didn't always come from strength alone. It came from adaptability, from using your mind, and from fighting with everything you had. Princess Nessa's eyes narrowed as she sized him up. She moved swiftly, taking a few steps back, her body flowing with grace. In an instant, she vanished, only to reappear directly in front of him, her foot aimed at his chest. Ryan barely had time to react, but his instincts kicked in. He sidestepped just in time, feeling the rush of wind as her foot missed by inches. She was fast, too fast, but Ryan's reflexes were sharp. With a sneer, Nessa spun around, launching a flurry of strikes. Her punches were precise and deadly, each one designed to land with maximum force. Ryan dodged and blocked, his body moving with the smoothness of someone who had trained for years. He wasn't used to this kind of speed, but he had faced enough dangerous situations to know how to handle pressure. He used the momentum of each of her missed attacks to move closer to her, waiting for the perfect moment to strike back. The crowd gasped in excitement as the battle unfolded. Nessa's attacks were relentless, but Ryan's focus never wavered. He wasn't just reacting. He was studying her, looking for weaknesses, understanding her rhythm. Every time she missed, every time she grew frustrated, Ryan knew he was winning the mental battle. Princess Nessa, frustrated by his calmness, shifted her approach. With a flick of her wrist, she activated a glowing blue energy pulse that emanated from her hands. The pulse shot forward, fast as lightning, aiming for Ryan's chest. But Ryan was already moving. His body slid to the side, and the pulse hit nothing but empty air. Nessa's eyes flashed with anger. "You're good, human," she hissed, "but no amount of dodging will save you from what's coming next." With a fierce cry, she slammed her hands into the ground, sending shockwaves rippling through the arena. The ground beneath Ryan's feet cracked, and he had to leap back to avoid being swallowed by a gaping hole. Ryan landed lightly on his feet, his heart racing. He had seen this ability before. Nessa was able to manipulate the very energy around her, bending it to her will. It was a powerful technique, one that could overwhelm most opponents. But Ryan wasn't most opponents. He was human. Nessa smiled, thinking she had him trapped, but Ryan had already anticipated the move. As she prepared to unleash another attack, he took a deep breath and dove forward, closing the distance between them in a flash. Before she could react, he grabbed her wrist, using her own momentum to twist her around and throw her off balance. She staggered, barely managing to keep her feet under her. The crowd murmured in surprise. Ryan hadn't just fought her, he had outsmarted her. "You rely on tricks," Ryan said, his voice steady but loud enough for her to hear. "But it's not the tricks that matter. It's what you do with them." Princess Nessa growled, her eyes flashing with fury. "You've only just begun to see what I'm capable of, human." But Ryan didn't flinch. He had made his move. And now the fight was truly on. The arena had grown quiet. The battle was far from over, but something had changed. Princess Nessa, still bruised and battered, stood tall, her eyes fixed on Ryan. The glow of her energy had dimmed, and her once proud stance had become more focused, more controlled. For the first time, she wasn't just fighting to prove she was stronger. She was fighting to learn, to adapt. Ryan stood across from her, also battered but unyielding. His chest rose and fell with each breath, his muscles sore from the strain of the fight. His mind was still sharp, still focused. This wasn't about winning anymore. It wasn't about proving who was stronger. It was about showing Nessa what true strength was, a strength that came from inside, not from arrogance or power alone. "You've changed, Nessa," Ryan said, his voice low but steady. "I can see it in your eyes. You've realized something, haven't you?" The princess didn't respond immediately. She was still processing the weight of her own actions. She had always believed that being a royal, being powerful, was enough. She had never questioned it, until now. Until this human had forced her to see things differently. "You think you've won this fight," Nessa said, her voice quieter than before. "You think you've broken me." Ryan's gaze softened. "That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not here to break you. I'm here to show you that there's more to strength than just your power." Nessa's eyes flashed. "You don't understand," she said, her voice rising. "I am the future of the Vraxian Empire. I've been trained to be the strongest, to lead my people. But now it feels like everything I believed in is falling apart. Ryan shook his head, stepping closer to her. You've been trained to fight, but not to think. Strength isn't just about what you can destroy. It's about what you can build, what you can protect. The princess's fists clenched, and she took a step back, still unsure of herself. She had been so sure of her power, so sure of her destiny. But now, standing in front of Ryan, she felt exposed. She had never faced something like this before, a challenge that didn't rely on force or dominance. You've always fought with everything you had, Ryan continued, but now it's time to fight with something more. Your mind, your heart, your understanding of the world around you. You've got the strength to change, Nessa, but only if you stop seeing power as the only way forward. Nessa's face softened, the anger that had once fueled her now replaced with a deep, heavy realization. She had spent her entire life believing that power and strength were one and the same. But in this fight, in this moment, she saw the truth. For the first time, she realized the cost of her arrogance, the cost of believing she was invincible. And that cost wasn't just her pride. It was the chance to truly grow, to learn, to be something more than just a symbol of power. Ryan stood there, watching her carefully. He didn't expect her to change overnight. But he knew that the seed had been planted. It was up to her now to decide what kind of leader she wanted to be. You're right, Nessa finally said, her voice steady. I've been blind, but I'm not done yet. Ryan nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. No one's ever really done, Nessa. As long as you keep learning, you're still growing. The crowd watched in silence, as if they too could sense the shift in the air. This wasn't just a fight between two warriors. This was a moment of transformation, both for the princess and for the human who had opened her eyes. Nessa took a deep breath, her body still aching, but her spirit stronger than it had been in a long time. The battle wasn't over, but something had changed. And now she was ready to fight, not just for herself, but for something greater. In this part, Nessa begins to fully grasp the cost of her arrogance and the limitations of power. Ryan's teachings start to sink in, and she begins to understand that true strength comes from adaptability, humility, and growth. The tension is still high, but the fight has now transformed into a deeper journey of self-realization for the princess. Let me know if you'd like to make any changes. The arena was quiet now. The echoes of the battle still lingered in the air, but the tension had shifted. Princess Nessa stood tall, her breathing steady, but her eyes were different. Gone was the arrogant, proud princess who had thought herself above everyone. Now there was something new in her gaze, understanding. It wasn't just the bruises on her body that told the story of this fight. It was the change in her heart, in her mind. Ryan stood a few feet away, his own body sore and exhausted. He had fought hard, but more than that, he had fought with purpose. He had come here not to defeat Nessa, but to help her see something she had never considered, the true meaning of strength. Now, as he looked at her, he could tell that she understood. It wasn't the victory that mattered, it was the lesson they had both learned. The crowd of spectators, which had been silent through most of the fight, began to murmur. They had witnessed something that they had never expected. A princess, a being of power and pride, brought to a place of humility by a human. And yet there was a respect in the air now, something that hadn't been there before. Nessa's strength had been tested, and she had come out of it changed. She glanced around at the crowd, then at Ryan. "You've shown me something I never thought possible," she said quietly, her voice softer than it had been throughout the fight. "I was blind, so sure that power was everything. But now I see that strength is more than just what you can destroy." Ryan nodded, his face expressionless, but his eyes warm. "It's about what you can protect, what you can build, and how you rise when everything seems lost. Nessa looked down at the ground for a moment, her mind racing. The fight had broken her in many ways, but it had also made her stronger. She had always been taught to rely on her power, her title, her bloodline. But now she knew that there was something deeper, something more meaningful than all of that. The Emperor, her father, stepped forward from the shadows. His face was a mask of anger, disappointment, and concern. He had watched the entire duel in silence, his gaze never leaving his daughter. But now, as he looked at her, he saw something he hadn't expected. "You've been defeated by a human, Nessa," the Emperor said, his voice hard. "This is a disgrace to our people. You're the future of the Empire. You shouldn't be learning lessons from an outsider." Nessa lifted her chin, her eyes meeting her father's with a new kind of strength. "Father, you're wrong," she said, her voice steady. "This human has taught me more about strength than any of the warriors in our empire ever could. I've been blind to the truth. Power isn't about dominance. It's about resilience, adaptability, and knowing when to learn, when to grow." The Emperor's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, he said nothing. The crowd watched, waiting for his response. Finally, he spoke again, his tone quieter. "You've learned something, Nessa. Something that may change the way we look at strength. But you must never forget your duty to our people." "I haven't forgotten it," she replied, her voice firm. "But I will lead them with a new understanding of what true strength is. I will not rely only on power. I will fight for what's right, for what's best for our people." The Emperor's gaze softened, but he said nothing more. The lesson had been taught, not through words, but through experience. And though he didn't fully understand it yet, he knew his daughter was no longer the same. She had been transformed by this battle, by this human, in a way he could never have expected. Nessa turned to Ryan, her eyes filled with new respect. "Thank you," she said simply, her voice full of sincerity. "You've shown me a different path. One I will follow, not just for me, but for my people." Ryan nodded, a small smile on his face. "I didn't do anything. You've always had the strength inside you. You just needed to see it." The fight was over. The lesson had been learned. And as the arena cleared, it was clear that things had changed, not just for Nessa, but for the entire empire. The future of the Vraxian people now rested on a new kind of strength, a strength that wasn't just about power, but about wisdom, humility, and growth. The arena was silent, except for the sound of heavy breathing. Princess Nessa lay on the ground, her body aching from the force of Ryan's throw. She struggled to push herself up, but her limbs felt like they were made of stone. The strength that had always defined her, the power she had taken for granted, seemed to be slipping away. Her royal bloodline, her abilities, none of it had helped her in this moment. Ryan stood over her, his expression hard but not cruel. He was tired, his body sore from the battle, but there was something else in his eyes, a quiet certainty. He had won, but it wasn't about victory anymore. It was about showing Nessa something that she had never considered. That power alone wasn't everything. "Get up," Ryan said, his voice calm but firm. "You've got more strength than this. Stop relying on your abilities and use your mind." Nessa's head snapped up at his words. How dare he speak to her like that? She was the princess of the Vraxian Empire. She had been trained since birth to be the strongest, the most powerful. She had never been told to think before using her strength. And now here was a human telling her what she lacked. She stood shakily, her eyes burning with fury. "You think you've won? You think you've taught me some lesson?" She spat, brushing dirt and dust from her clothes. "I will never be humbled by you." Ryan didn't flinch. It's not about humility. It's about realizing that being strong doesn't mean you're invincible. You've been fighting with all your power, but you've forgotten something important. Strength isn't just in what you can do. It's in how you handle what's thrown at you. Nessa's anger flared up again. She wanted to snap at him, to unleash another blast of energy. But she could feel it now. The exhaustion, the energy she had been using, her power was fading. The cracks in her once unshakable confidence were widening. For the first time, she wasn't sure what to do. Ryan took a step back, watching her carefully. You could destroy me, Nessa. You could wipe me out with a single blast. But I've seen warriors with the same arrogance as you, and they fall every time. When you fight only with power, you lose what matters. Nessa clenched her fists, her teeth gritted. This wasn't how she thought this fight would go. She had expected to crush him. She had expected to prove the superiority of the Vraxian people. But she had underestimated him. She had underestimated the human spirit. You think you know everything about strength? She asked, her voice shaky, but still holding a hint of defiance. You think you can teach me? Ryan shook his head, his tone softer now. I don't think I know everything, but I know one thing. Strength isn't just in power. It's in what you do with it, how you use it when it counts. For a moment, Nessa didn't respond. She stood there, her chest rising and falling with deep breaths, her mind racing. Was he right? Had she been blinded by her own pride? She had always believed that her powers made her superior to everyone else. But now, standing here in front of this human, she wasn't so sure. I never thought about it that way, she said quietly, almost to herself. I've always been told that power is everything. But you're right. I've been using it all wrong. Ryan nodded. You're stronger than you think. But real strength isn't about blasting through everything. It's about knowing when to fight and knowing when to stop. Nessa's gaze softened, her anger finally beginning to fade. She was still proud, still a princess, but now she was starting to understand. She wasn't just a product of her bloodline. She was more than that. And maybe, just maybe, this human had shown her something she would never have learned otherwise. You've taught me something today, human, Nessa said, her voice quieter now, almost respectful. I underestimated you, and in doing so, I've learned a lesson I never expected. Ryan gave her a small, tired smile. It's never too late to learn, Nessa. The tension in the arena began to shift. The battle wasn't over, but something had changed. Nessa's arrogance had been replaced by something new, something she hadn't felt in a long time. And it was that moment, standing there with Ryan, that the princess realized that strength wasn't just about power. It was about humility, adaptability, and understanding. The arena was filled with the sound of cheers and gasps. The alien spectators, who had expected Princess Nessa to easily defeat the human, now watched in stunned silence. Ryan Holt had done the unthinkable. He had countered her first real attack. The princess, the proud heir to the Vraxian throne, had never been made to look so vulnerable before. Her face twisted with disbelief and anger. You're better than I thought, human, she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. But this game of yours ends now. Princess Nessa's body seemed to shimmer, as if the air around her was charged with energy. Her eyes glowed with a fiery light, and she held her arms out in front of her, palms facing the sky. The ground beneath her began to rumble, and the energy around her crackled with raw power. She was preparing to unleash her full strength. Ryan's stance tightened. He could feel the change in the air, the calm before a storm. He had expected this. Nessa wasn't going to give up easily. She was about to fight with everything she had, and Ryan had to be ready. He was already sweating under the pressure, but he knew he couldn't afford to make a mistake. Without warning, Nessa slammed her hands down onto the ground. A surge of bright blue energy shot up from the earth, spreading like a wave of fire through the arena. Ryan leaped to the side just in time as the shockwave tore through the ground, leaving cracks and holes where he had just been standing. The heat from the blast scorched the air, and the shockwave sent debris flying in every direction. Ryan's heart raced, but his mind was clear. He needed to keep moving, stay unpredictable. Nessa was powerful, but she was also predictable in her attacks. She relied on raw power, and that could be used against her. The princess rose from the rubble, her hands still crackling with energy. "You're not even worthy of my full strength," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "You should have stayed behind your armor, human." Ryan was silent, watching her carefully. His muscles ached from the constant movement, but his focus never wavered. This wasn't just a fight, it was a test. A test of everything humanity had been through, a test of how far they could go when pushed to the edge. Nessa darted toward him, faster than before, her body moving in fluid, almost unnatural motions. She swung her arm at him, sending another pulse of energy toward his chest. But this time, Ryan was ready. He dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the blast, but the force of it sent him tumbling across the ground. His head hit the dirt, but he quickly pushed himself up, rolling to his feet. "You can't keep dodging forever," Nessa shouted, her voice full of fury. She moved again, this time with even more speed, her energy bursts more precise, more controlled. Ryan took a deep breath, his eyes narrowing. He had to end this soon. He wasn't going to outlast her if it came down to pure strength. But there was something else, something Nessa hadn't counted on. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a human. And humans had an ability to adapt, to think their way out of the toughest situations. With a sudden, quick movement, Ryan grabbed a piece of debris from the shattered ground, a large metal rod, and used it to block Nessa's next attack. The princess's energy pulse struck it, but Ryan used the impact to push himself forward, closing the distance between them. Nessa was too focused on her power, too sure of herself. Before she could react, Ryan launched himself at her, grabbing her arms and twisting them behind her back. The crowd gasped. They had never seen anyone dare to get this close to the princess, especially not in the middle of one of her power surges. "Not so confident now, are we?" Ryan muttered, holding her steady, his grip strong despite his exhaustion. Nessa's breathing was heavy, and for the first time in this duel, she looked surprised. Her strength was slipping, and her arrogance was crumbling. She had underestimated the human, and now she had no choice but to face the reality that maybe, just maybe, he was stronger than she had believed. The arena was silent now, the dust from the shattered ground settling around them like a heavy fog. Princess Nessa struggled in Ryan's grip, her breath coming in short gasps. She had never been this close to defeat before. For a moment, her usual confidence seemed to vanish, replaced by frustration. She had always relied on her power, her alien abilities. But this human, this mere soldier, had found a way to match her at every turn. The realization was sinking in. She wasn't as unbeatable as she had once thought. Ryan held her firmly, his muscles straining from the effort. He was exhausted, every part of his body aching from the fierce battle. His heart was pounding in his chest, but his mind was clear. This was the moment he had been waiting for. He had to make her see that strength wasn't just about power. It was about determination, about refusing to give up. "Let me go, human," Nessa snarled, her eyes blazing with fury. "You're nothing compared to me." "Nothing." Ryan's grip tightened slightly, not in anger, but in quiet resolve. "You're wrong," he said, his voice steady. "You think strength comes from energy pulses and ancient powers. But real strength is about more than that. It's about what you're willing to fight for. Nessa's face twisted in confusion. She had never been spoken to like this, especially not in the middle of a fight. Her royal bloodline had always been respected, her power feared. But now, standing there with this human holding her back, she felt something she had never known: uncertainty. "You don't understand," she hissed, her anger building again. "I am the future of my empire. I am power." Ryan stepped back slightly, allowing her to stand. He didn't release her right away, but his gaze softened for a brief moment. "You think that makes you strong? Power doesn't make someone strong. It's how you use that power, what you do with it. I don't need a throne to know that." Princess Nessa's eyes flashed with a mix of anger and realization. For the first time, she was seeing herself not as a royal princess, but as someone who had been blinded by her own arrogance. The weight of the moment was heavy. Ryan wasn't just fighting her physically. He was forcing her to confront her own beliefs, her own weaknesses. "I have no time for speeches, human." She spat, her face red with fury. She pushed away from him with sudden strength, knocking him back several steps. In the blink of an eye, her body shifted, her form glowing once more with that dangerous energy. Ryan braced himself. He knew what was coming. This time, she wasn't holding back. The air around them shimmered with the power she was about to unleash. But Ryan wasn't afraid. He had faced impossible odds before. This wasn't just a battle of strength. It was a battle of will, and he had something the princess didn't: a human's ability to adapt. Nessa raised her arms high, sending a surge of energy toward him. The blast was fast, blindingly bright, and powerful. Ryan didn't flinch. He saw the pattern of her attack, the way she concentrated her energy. It was all too familiar. Just as the blast neared him, Ryan dove to the ground, rolling out of the way. The energy pulse hit the spot where he had just stood, sending a massive explosion of light and sound across the arena. The crowd jumped back in shock. The force of the blast left a crater in the arena floor, the ground cracked and smoking. Ryan stood slowly, wiping the sweat from his brow. He was on his feet, but barely. His muscles screamed for rest. But there was no time. Nessa's power was relentless, and he couldn't let her get the upper hand. He had to finish this. The princess, now breathing heavily, glared at him. Her pride stung. She had unleashed everything she had, and yet he was still standing. She was beginning to understand. This human wasn't just another warrior. He was something more. "You're stronger than I thought," she admitted, her voice quieter now. "I've underestimated you." Ryan didn't say anything. He simply nodded, ready for whatever she would do next. The fight wasn't over. And now it was about more than just victory. It was about proving a point. To the princess, to the galaxy, and to everyone who thought humans were weak.